The latest polls show that Canadians are conflicted about the upcoming election. I'm Marco Perry. Welcome to the Perry Platform. It doesn't really feel like 4 years have gone by since the last election. Time really is crazy because in 3 months, it'll be time again to vote. According to the CBC, polls find high levels of anxiety and a low level of confidence in politicians ahead of the fall election. I can't really say I blame anyone for having those feelings. It really seems like a monumental election. It feels like it's going to shape the future greatly. This is especially true given how polarized things have gotten and the current pressing issues that need immediate attention, like climate change. Having the right leader at a time like now, that would be a monumentally positive force. So, according to the poll, two of the top things that are worrying Canadians right now are, number one, the cost of basic things like food and gas, and two, the impacts of climate change. Now, that's a rather ironic pairing, and it indicates the moral dilemma that we, Canadians, are currently in the midst of. Gas prices and food prices, well, they've risen partly due to the carbon tax. Our attempt at mitigating the impacts of climate change are the carbon tax. Of course we get a rebate, but as I mentioned before, many families simply can't wait until tax return season, and it has placed a burden on them. So, you must ask yourself, how do you really want it? It seems like you can't have your cake and eat it too. If you want to fight climate change, it is going to come with a cost and inconveniences. This is going to be true regardless of the strategy you choose because changing habits, that's always going to be a core goal. Maybe it's a question of finding a better balance of sacrifice and reward, or maybe it's just a matter of getting used to the higher cost. Either way, that will soon be revealed by the votes come October. If people are really cool with the carbon tax and they've warmed up to the idea in let's say 3 more months, then the Liberals will probably do it a little bit better, because right now, the carbon tax is, you could say, a major attack plan for the Conservatives. That's what they're riding on, along with some other scandals like the SNC-Lavalin issue. But I would say right now, it's the carbon tax. If people do want a different alternative, it seems like the Conservatives will get the edge. We'll have to see how that plays out. CBC also mentions that Canadians are showing a contradictory stance when it comes to tolerance and change. The results indicate that Canadians take pride in tolerance, but they also worry that the country is changing too much and too fast. First of all, I don't think that they are right in calling this contradictory though. It's really a lazy analogy. At a basic level, it's already plausible to both be tolerant and also worry about the path you're on. Not everything revolves around tolerance. It's almost as if they're making the case that regardless of the nature of the change, it's un-Canadian to raise any concerns, and that's simply not true. Change is an umbrella term for a variety of topics ranging from immigration to taxes to healthcare to social policies. The list goes on, and if they can't really specify why exactly is contradictory, I'm not too sure why they're making the claim in the first case. Tolerance is not the same as perpetual, willful submission. There are limits to what people want to accept, and it appears Canadians are feeling we have reached them. Another contradiction they pointed out is that Canadians feel voting is both a duty and at the same time a waste of time. That does not seem all that contradictory to me though. Again, lots of things that I consider a duty might still be a waste of time, but I carry them out. Duty just means you have to do it. You might have to do something, but it could still be a waste of time, like filling out paperwork. It could be contradictory if Canadians said it was a duty, but they didn't want to vote, or they weren't going to vote. That would be a good example, but they kind of missed the ball with that. Aside from those examples, I don't think it's a waste of time though. That argument that voting really has no purpose, it holds no water. One vote, when combined with the community, that power grows exponentially, and that's how change comes about. Imagine for a second if everybody had that same mentality, that voting is a waste of time. It would then become a self-fulfilling prophecy because you've brought about the degradation of a democracy. Nobody would be voting, and then, of course, it really doesn't matter because the small few group of the elites will just pick who's in power. you definitely do not want that. Go out and vote and have your say counted. The system may not be the best, but you really have no right to complain about anything if you don't vote. Period. So, back to the poll. Do you want to know what a major key to winning this election is? Tackling the cost of living in Canada. Over 70% of respondents state that they are worried about the future for either themselves or their family due to dramatically raising costs. That's not just carbon taxes like I mentioned before. This is way bigger. I would assume housing affordability is a massive component in that, and probably the second largest is savings and retirement. With the way things are going, I'm not quite sure who's going to be able to live in the GTA or Vancouver, and as time goes on, the prices everywhere seem to be going up too. Look at Montreal. It was once considered very affordable, but now prices are catching up. Ottawa too. Of course, you can always move to more rural areas, but I don't think that solution, although realistic, is going to appease the voting base. Taking action to curb money laundering, excessive foreign ownership, empty properties, and even zoning bylaws, all of those will be well received if added to a campaign. I fully expect to see them come up at some point. This next part of the poll is very interesting too. 88% of people said they feel that politicians care more about staying in power than doing what's right. Of course, 100%. There is no argument there. That is definitely the case. You even have a cringe reversal where politicians will mask certain actions as doing what's right, but it's really just a play to appear angelic or to cater to people, to appease them, to preserve their power. At the same time, 47% of people said that no party represents what they care about most. That's nearly half of Canadians who can't identify with a particular party. It's really not that hard to be in that situation because there's really only two parties to pick from. Anyways, maybe there's a couple. NDP, the Green Party, Liberal, and Conservative, but we all know only two of those really have a chance. This ties back to another issue I brought up before, and it's about being an ideologue. It's highly unlikely that you will hold 100% of the same values within the doctrines of conservative or liberal parties. The reality is, people have a mix of opinions and ideas because we are individuals. You can be a liberal who does not like gun control, a conservative who does not like organized religions. The possibilities are endless. Trying to pigeonhole yourself into one of these two parties is a recipe for feeling cheated. Let's not kid ourselves either. There really aren't that many choices in Canadian politics, and that's where the biggest issue lies. A more productive system would have many parties debating and vying for leadership. It would allow for greater competition and really push leaders to hone in on their platforms, to specify what exactly they're going to do, and the pressure will be on for them to deliver. Otherwise, there's more parties to come and consume their votes next election. Right now, if you hold more right-leaning views, you can only vote for the Conservative Party. If you're more left-leaning, it's typically the Liberal. You can vote NDP, but you could, and that's one case where if you really like them, you should vote for them. But at the same time, there's not enough votes ever, so it's unlikely they really pose a threat. It's kind of like a paradox. So what do you do then? The Conservatives let you down, but you still want to have right-leaning politicians. There's only one choice. There really isn't even a choice in that situation. It kind of forces you to go with that same party. Also, if you needed any more proof that populism is going to play a role in politics for quite some time, 78% said they believe that the country is divided between ordinary people and the elites. That's the perfect storm for yet another us versus them campaign. For the people. Not saying that's bad, but it needs to have an honest politician at the forefront. Not sure we have too many of those left. One last stat I want to bring up is that 65% of people said they agree with the statement, "We have gone too far in accommodating every group in society." Kind of controversial, right? I think it's because identity politics and virtue signaling, they've risen to a certain level of notoriety, and those seem to be two of the most obvious culprits of the sentiment. There is nothing wrong with creating an entire landscape, even country, that is accommodating to all. In fact, that's really the goal. That's what you want. But when you start bending the rules for certain groups, you break the game, slightly at first, but noticeably. Canadians want to all feel Canadian, united. The more specific you label yourself under your group identity, whatever that is, there's multiple you can choose from, the more of a divide you create, a barrier of sorts. Oftentimes, all that ends up happening is the issues worsen as feelings of resentment build up, as victim mentalities start to come to the surface. Look at America for a place that is sky high with tension despite repeated efforts to remedy objections. I think that what the stats are showing is the populace is growing a displeasure with the radical left's agenda to revolve politics around group identity. It's as if they hold that to be the paramount factor in an individual's lifestyle. It's just not accurate, and Canadians seemingly don't want to play that game anymore. And it wasn't mentioned in the article, but I also feel like that Canada's battle, you could say, with China is going to also play a major role in the upcoming election. Someone who bases their platform around being tough, being strong, standing up for Canada, that might be a good stance versus someone who is willing to negotiate with them after all they've done to us. And it's funny though, because that can also be a form of deceit. There really isn't too much that Canada can do in the wake of China's malevolence and their destruction. We really do need a strong ally like America to come forward and help us out. That's the most realistic proposition. But you might have someone like Andrew Scheer, who I've seen try to make it seem like we're going to go toe-to-toe with China, rile up support as if he's the only hope. He's the Winter Soldier. He's going to go in there by himself like the Avengers and break out the 2 Canadians who are in jail over there. It's not realistic. It might be a feel-good thing. It might be too hyped up after watching the Avengers movie and thinking it's a likely possibility, but it's not. And just one last thing before we wrap up. The overall leadership options we have, they don't seem to be too great either. So people don't like the parties, and the leaders are certainly not doing anything to help fix that. You have Justin Trudeau, a seemingly weak leader who has been caught up in scandals. And if you, is this too funny? If you watch his interviews, he seems lost a lot of the times. And that's not somebody I feel who you would want to be the Prime Minister of Canada. And with the Conservatives, you have Andrew Scheer. You don't really know too much about that guy. His campaign, his platform, it's basically saying, vote for me, I'm not Trudeau. And funny enough, Trudeau's doing the same. Vote for me, I'm not Scheer. I really wish they would just hone in on why they're the better candidate and not just trying to get votes because they're not the other person. It's really a lame way to approach politics. And Andrew Scheer, we're talking about character traits, he doesn't really seem to be the most dominant leader either. He doesn't really seem to be that kind of guy who's going to lead Canada in a just, productive, and idealistic type of way. I just don't see it. I still think that based on all the polling data we've seen, the Conservatives are in a position to win this next election. They sort of have it in the bag. It's their race to lose. If they do something stupid or they slip up, then they might shift the power balance. But right now, it seems to be theirs. And that's with a leader like Andrew Scheer. It really makes me wonder how much better they'd be doing in polling if they had a stronger candidate. And that's one reason why I have an admiration for the American system. Look at the Democratic pollings right now. They're trying to compete to see who's going to go and face against Trump. Whether you like the candidates or not, there's a lot of them, and there's some very strong candidates among them too. How we ended up with Andrew Scheer is really kind of beyond me. I'm not too sure it was the best move. And it's the same thing too with the Ontario Conservatives. It feels like they're trying to throw these races. They picked Doug Ford as their rep. They still won. And at that time, look at the polling data now. It wasn't too far-fetched of a foresight to have that Doug Ford wasn't going to be the best candidate. He was kind of like a Trudeau, really, campaigning off his name, his brother. And yeah, that nepotism is never really a recipe for good politics. So all in all, things are shaping up to be very interesting this October. We haven't seen the parties really rev up just yet, so expect things to get heated very quickly and very soon. As always, I'll be keeping you up to date on the latest developments. Well, that's about it for today. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you soon. If you enjoyed the content, be sure to leave a review and follow me on Twitter at PerryPlatform.